Governments and business are grappling with the growing demand for skilled labour in the oil and gas industries. This week, a national conference in Darwin outlined strategies to deliver the workforce that will be required over the next decade. Alison Middleton caught up with some of the conference speakers.
Across Australia, the resources sector has been booming. In the Northern Territory, government and business are looking for ways to deliver the workforce and skills required by the oil and gas sector over the next decade. The growth in these industries will stretch the country's labour supply.
As you know, there are 3 operating LNG plants in Australia, but there are 7 actually in construction. And what you find is you tend to have a peak in the construction workforce and then it drops off as they move to operations. So during the kind of 2015 type time frame, we expect that peak to reach between 20 and 30,000 in the construction workforce.
And is Australia going to be able to deliver that workforce on its own?
Look, I think it's fair to say, given that we're so close and we've already got these 7 LNG plants in construction now, that we are going to need assistance, and in fact we know we need assistance from overseas. So I think the first preference for all the companies is to see what they can do to actually take people locally and train them and bring them up to speed. But in reality, given the size of the task, people have to look overseas, and therefore temporary visas such as 457s are very appropriate in this construction phase.
Will we see a lot of long-term jobs out of this boom, or will most of the jobs be in the short-term construction phase?
I think when you think about the fact that these LNG processing plants will be lasting 20, 25 years, you are seeing a longevity in the jobs that will be in those areas. It is fair to say in the construction phase you will see a spike, but then as other projects come on stream, those construction workers can move to other projects.
Across Australia, billions of dollars worth of resource sector projects are in the pipeline. 2/3 of the country's economic growth this year will be driven by spending on capacity expansion. Access Economics describes this period as a unique opportunity.
Look, it is enormous dollars. You're talking almost $200 billion worth of projects, and I know that's a big figure, but all of the economic growth in Australia in the financial year we just finished was driven by spending by businesses on capacity expansion, and 2/3 of the economic growth this year Australia-wide will be that, and a lot of the territory's growth in the next little while will be the same thing.
Is this really all good news? Do you see a downside?
In economics, there is never anything that is only good news, but let's just say there's a lot of good news here. Half the world is having an industrial revolution. This is, a moment in history, and it really won't last long. And those areas that move faster will get ongoing benefits out of this. Yes, the crazy phase, if you like, is that construction phase with everything happening at once, but you get long-lasting benefits thereafter.
While there'll be winners, there can be negative social effects like the high cost of living and the high ratio of men to women. Are you concerned there could be detrimental social impacts?
True, there are those costs. You've got to remember, though, that the profit margins that are driving this surge in development, and that is the key driver of economic growth in Australia, they're not permanent. There's never been a permanent boom in profit margins in anything. And the ability to move fast to mean that Australia gets that development rather than some other places around the world will bring lasting benefits. But of course that speed, you're right, will lead to those usual congestion costs. Does it make sense to have everybody living here in a given spot and no fly in, fly out? Well, no, it doesn't. You see a very concentrated development phase.
What about the criticism that we're selling off a finite resource without adequately investing the profits in something that will provide a future income?
So you've got to remember, the resources sector more generally obviously pays company tax like everybody else does, but it pays royalties atop that, and of course in oil and gas, as has long been true, but now true across the mining sector in general, there are new mining taxes that sit above the state and territory royalties. So there are a lot of dollars going back to the government, or governments. I think what people also don't realise is that, the China boom that we're seeing, the increase in prices for all sorts of industrial commodities, coal and iron ore, as well as, oil and gas, that means a lot of benefit to a lot of Australians in ways that we just don't think. You look at, the increase in mining sector profits as a share of the increase in national income that Australia's got off the back of this China boom. And you're talking about something, mining profits is a third of the total. Our ability to walk into a store and get a cheaper big screen TV than it used to be a while ago is partly off the back of what's happening in the resources sector. It's coming through wealth, it's coming through jobs, it's coming through a tax system. Australians federally have just had 8 personal income tax cuts in a row, much of it driven by a resources boom.
Is there anything that the Territory should be doing to take advantage of this boom that it's not currently doing?
You've always welcomed workers from elsewhere, whether they're arriving from Sydney or they're arriving from somewhere else in the world, and I think that's always been one of the Territory's great strengths, that you do have these short-term peaks in your need for workers, and that welcoming angle is something that the Territory has always been excellent at, and I'd heartily recommend it to you for the next few years.